Hello and welcome back to the Cookie Jar Golf podcast. I am Sam Williams, and today we've got a really special guest on the pod for us. We spent like 2 hours talking to Ronan Rafferty about his career, everything from growing up in Northern Ireland, playing the Walker Cup at Cypress Point in 81, his Ryder Cup appearance in 89 at the Belfry, and also looking at some of his successes and adventures along the way. Ronan's just a great guy, superb storyteller, and we could have gone for days, but we think this is a great episode. It's a little longer than usual, it's just 2 hours, so by all means pause it, come back to it, but it's a cracking episode, and without further ado, we hope you enjoy the pod.
Watch this.
Hello and welcome back to the Cookie Jar Golf podcast. I'm joined today by Bruce Fitzpatrick.
Hello.
And special guest, we've got Ronan Rafferty on. Ronan, how are you?
Wow, very well indeed. Considering lock in for up here for a while, but enjoying myself. I'm sort of getting into my wine collection a bit more. I've been collecting for about 35 years now, and fairly decent collection that I've been able to put together, but I'm managing to sample a few things.
Okay,
nice.
Brilliant. Nothing else to do, is there? Really? I mean, it's amazing how the witching hour, gets earlier and earlier.
Creeps forward, doesn't it? It creeps
Creeps
forward.
yeah.
I'm sort of down to sort of like, about 3-4 o'clock now. It feels like okay, because obviously with darker nights, that's sort of, but you can go much earlier. I mean, you haven't got Zoom meetings to conduct and podcasts and stuff, Ronan.
With playing golf all around the world, there's 12 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. For the benefit of our listeners, you live up in Scotland nowadays, nearby Glen Eagles, correct?
Yeah. Well, I've lived up here for, 18 years or so, sort of 16, 17, 18 years. And wife is from Octorada. I ended up marrying my best buddy on tour with Brian Marchbank, and ended up marrying his wife's sister. So we're now related. So Brian and I can always say that we slept together. I'll quantify that and say that when I first started on tour, Brian and I roomed for about 5 years. So it wasn't quite as intimating, but Brian and I have been buddies for since nearly the day I turned pro. So that's coming up on it is 40 years. Go, does it fly?
Bloody hell!
I know, 40 years.
Wow.
God, you can live a lifetime in 40 years.
Incredible stuff. And is that where you play a little bit of your golf, Octorada, or?
No. Actually, I'm the ambassador for the Renaissance Club. I hardly ever go to Glen Eagles. It's amazing when you mention you live near Glen Eagles. People, oh yeah, it's fantastic. The hotel's fantastic. The Kings, the Queen's great. The Ryder Cup and all that sort of stuff. But I only really go there for dinner and food, and occasionally hit balls. There's a beautiful little par 3 course at Glen Eagles as well. There's a pitch and putt course beside the hotel, but there's a par 3 course left of the First of the Kings, which is a great game of golf. You can hit every iron in the bag, so that's quite good for a bit of practice, but hardly ever go there. I'm busy. I'm down at Renaissance a lot of the time. I do quite a lot of corporate stuff, so I'm traveling around the country, and I go to a lot of remote places. I have a project of trying to play I did play the top 100 course in the British Isles. Then I played the master list of the 225, and then, other courses of interest on top of that. So I keep myself busy during the season, but normally once the hour goes back, I'm pretty full at it. 5 days a week doing corporate stuff, meeting people, looking after guests at Renaissance, and just generally doing golf stuff.
That's awesome. Bruce wasn't a fan of Renaissance, where you got turned. Was it 9 and 7 or something? It was you.
Yeah.
It was
by your partner, who was you were sort of desperately clinging on to his coattails there, Sam. But yeah, thanks for reminding me of it. I'm just glad we got some good videography to make the trip worthwhile. Actually,
absolutely.
Did you like our 10th hole? What a beautiful hole that is! The par 4 around the cliff. The cliff.
Yeah.
And that right, beautiful golf hole that is.
And probably the best halfway house as well that it leads to in golf, I would say.
It's not the worst view in the world, is it? Yeah, I know. I love it there. It's amazing many people get stuck during the summer.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
You know, the first gin and tonic leads to the 7th and 8th gin and tonic, and before you know it, they're whiling away the afternoon. And we do a very good mince pie out there now. They've started doing macaroni pies. I bet that's something you don't get down south.
Oh wow, yeah.
Well, I must admit the pies were very good. That was a very enjoyable hour or so we spent in that halfway house with Malcolm. So I guess to kind of kick this thing off, where do we start? Maybe sort of talk about your entry into the game, because it was a pretty early start into some pretty heavy-hitting tournaments for you, wasn't it, Ronan? So just tell us a little bit about kind of growing up and getting into golf, if that's okay.
Well, golf for me, getting into golf was actually quite simple. I mean, I went to a school in Newry, County Down, the Abbey Grammar. That the primary school was at the bottom of the hill, and the senior school was at the top of the hill. And we used to get the bus. We moved from Newry down to Warren Point, which, you know, it's quite a famous golfing course down in Warren Point. But at the time, you know, I didn't play. But I used to get the bus with my brother, and I used to have to wait on the bus with him or get it with him up at the grammar school. So he used to have to walk up the hill after I was done. And, you know, golf was on the curriculum there. You know, they had a golf lessons once a week on a Wednesday. And I just remember sort of having to, my brother started doing it, was, you know, waiting another 45 minutes. And I ended up going in. And it was, you know, as you do, you're sitting in the corner and you think, oh, I'll see what this is like. And I started sort of swinging it. And the guy, Don Patterson, who you know ended up being a very famous coach in Ireland and actually for the PGA, just sort of said, "Oh, that looks okay." I hit a few balls, and before you know, I was hooked, and that was it. And then, you know, Warren Point, you know, but God, this is a long time ago. You asked me a question about stuff over 40 years ago, and I know it's a long time. God, where did it all go? And Warren Point had 3 Irish internationals in the 1 year, 3 youth Irish internationals, Rory McCormick, Pat Traynor, Peter O'Hagan. And one of the first days I went down to the golf club, these guys were having their pictures taken in their Irish sweaters. And they were going to England. They were going to England. You know, you got to remember, this is 1976, well, not even 76, 74 or so in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And yeah, they were going to England and to play in the internationals, and that got me. That was me off. And then Don took me under his wing, and by 14, you know, I was playing 54 holes a day with mates, hitting balls in between. You know, I was always going to be a pro golfer. I mean, I started playing the big ball when I was 14. I mean, these things were hard to get a hold of. The small ball was then, everything was very amateurish. You know, you couldn't do anything, or, you know, your union were down and you couldn't receive anything.
Big ball was tournament play, right?
Well, yeah, because I was playing all sorts of boys stuff, but then they allowed me to play in the boys championship. So, you know, I was turning up playing this 14-year-old playing in the Connacht boys at Athlone with a big ball, and they're all looking at me going, "What are you doing that for?" You know, and I'm going to be a pro, you know, all this sort of stuff. And you can see them looking at you going, yeah. And I remember when I was 16, I'd won some inter-school stuff. And I mean, at this stage as well, I mean, I'd basically stopped going to school because at 16, I was a boy, youth and senior for my county, my province, my club, my country, and GB&I.
Wow.
And there wasn't a lot of time for going to school. Yeah. But there's 2 major boys competition or inter-schools competitions at the time, the Aer Lingus and the Ulster schools or something. And basically the deal was, as long as I played for the school and these sort of things, they ticked me in. So you know, I wouldn't appear for weeks, and then suddenly I'd turn up at some golf club and play with the school team and hopefully beat some other young kid in a thing, and then disappear again for weeks. But you know, at 16 as well, I was sent over to the Irish team. You know, I'd made the squad at 15, played in the home internationals. Well, this was, I'm sort of relating all sorts of stories here, but the 1979, when I was picked for the team, the full Irish team at 15, was the year that we had some serious bombings in Northern Ireland, and it was cancelled. We ended up just playing a little match against Wales at Porthcawl, and England played Scotland up at Troon. And then at 16, I was playing, I was living in the UK, traveling. This is when I'd met like Roger Chapman. I don't know, he played on the tour, and then he won 2 major senior majors there a few years ago. Roger and I are best buddies for 40 odd years or so. I ended up staying with him. We went over for the Lytham Trophy in April, and basically I never went home. That was me done. And so I played the whole sort of UK circuit. I mean, I only ever played like 4 Irish championships. I only played in the East of Ireland twice and the Irish Close twice. And it's amazing how many people come up to you during your lifetime and say, "Oh, I remember watching you playing in the North of Ireland at Portrush." You go, "No, I didn't. No. Or,
I was never there. I was actually never there.
I beat you in the 3rd round of the. No, actually, you didn't. Anyway, so I was.
Do you break it to them when they say that, or do you sort of nod and go along with it and kind of
let
spoil
them that? Because I'm sure they probably beat somewhere. I just can't remember. Because I played all the time. I mean, because golf clubs in Ireland in those days, every golf club used to have what was known as a scratch trophy, which was 4 and under, 4 handicap and under. And if you had a 36-holer on Saturday, 36-holer somewhere else on Sunday, or some of the bigger clubs had 72-hole ones. So look, I spent from when I was able to, which was basically halfway through being 14 years old, to when I turned pro at 17. I mean, I was the youngest European Tour pro, probably think still am. You had 72 holes of tournament to play every week, and that was in between all the club matches, the county matches, and this match, this, and AN other stuff that you went off to play for. So golf for me quite early was a full-time game.
Yeah,
and a little story. I remember that I left school the day I was legally able to. Some stage at 16, April 6, when I was 16 years old, and I went in, early morning, got all my gear, and sort of like upped and left, and people were shouting at me, "What are you doing?" So, "Oh, I'm leaving," and they hauled me down to the careers teacher to sort of have a bit of a chat, and he sat me down very sternly. He said, "Rafferty, what are you going to do for a living?" "Oh, going to be a pro golfer, sir." No, what are you going to do for a proper job? And well, anyway, the rest is history.
Yeah, worked out okay in the end, I guess.
It worked out all right in the end. That practice.
And I guess, by the sounds of things, you were not only were you in love with the game and playing it regularly, but you're also getting quite a bit of success. Am I right in thinking, you won things like the Boys Amateur Championship, and then you kind of qualified for the Open at the age of 16, was it?
Yeah, God, you're reminding me of all sorts of things. Yeah, I won the British Boys at Barassi, actually, down the road. Oh, the British Boys, because they used to be said, we used to have an international match against Scotland or so before. I think there were all these little international matches. And so you go over early and you play these foursomes and singles, as they always used to do in those days. And get into the boys' championship and win around. Anyway, I ended up beating my teammate Jan Friend, Philip Walton, in the semi-final, and ended up beating David Ray in the final. And we both, people won't remember because golf companies come and go, but I used to have a set of golf clubs called Confidence, an American company, and we both turned up. We both had Confidence golf clubs. I'm sure it's probably one of the few times that 2 obscure names out of golf. But in Ireland, the finals don't start until like 10 o'clock or something in the morning. And all the officials we're all having breakfast. And at about 8:45, I've sort of said to him, look, I'm looking at the start sheet. I'm trying to fill in, because these big RNA sheets of all the draw and stuff. And I'm trying to fill in this thing to have a copy of this, me getting to the final. And I sort of look at the final and it says 9 o'clock. And I'm thinking, hang on, nobody said anything about 9 o'clock. Anyway, I sort of got up the fish and go, "Oh, sir, I think the final's at 9 o'clock. And the guy goes, "Oh, God, Christ almighty." Anyway, literally, I am being sped through the streets of Ayr or something to this golf course, screeched to halt into the middle of the car park, rush out. I've still got my normal shoes on. And I'm literally been on my second call. David Ray standing the first tee, a couple of hundred people run the first tee. I'm on my second call on the tee, my third call, you get DQ'd. I'd literally have the driver in my hand, peg it down with the tee, and have a quick practice swing, take a swing, hit it down the fairway. My golf shoes come running after me. One of the officials has got my golf shoes in the hand, and I'm literally, he hits his tee shot, I stick my shoes on, sort of rush down the fairway and hit an 8-iron stone dead one up.
Unreal. And they say, what does it take to be a professional golfer at the top levels?
Yeah. No dynamic warm up or buckets of balls beforehand.
Yeah.
Straight into it.
No chat with the biomechanist. No sort of morning yoga or anything like that. Just run out.
And the other spooky thing is, I won 6 and 5. I think there's 36-hole final. I won 6 and 5, and so I won on the 13th green. I think it was. I won on the 13th, and my birthday's the 13th of January.
Wow,
brilliant.
I won like on the 13th of June or something. On the 13th hole, my birthday's the 13th, so I've always said 13 is my lucky thing. So if I unfortunately I'd stopped playing in the days that the golf ball companies, when you won tournaments or enough tournaments that they made a golf ball with your specific number on it. So I've never been able to get a golf ball with 13 on it. And I mean, it went on from there because I was this is a 1579. That would have been 16. So the Irish team started sending us over for the Lytham Trophy, and I said I went over in April, whenever it was, 80, and never went home. That's good friends with Roger. Stayed the summer over there, played the whole amateur circuit in the UK, came back occasionally, and then at the end of that year, actually, I went to South Africa as an amateur. God, I nearly forgot about that. I went to South Africa. I played the whole Sunshine Tour as an amateur. Never missed a cut. Played like 12 tournaments over the winter, 4 months or so down in South Africa. Never missed a cut.
And I guess when you're having that amount of like early success, I guess there's just never a doubt in your mind there that you can kind of compete at the highest level and turn professional and make a really good career of it. It's just you're totally confident.
I'm only going to be a pro golfer, and everything I'm doing, I've played the big ball all my life. And I mean, you got to remember, they were rubbish. The golf balls were rubbish. You could stick your finger in a Titleist and take a chunk out of it, dodgy pieces of wood with plastic inserts and 4 screws. And, golf equipment wasn't the best, stuff wasn't the best, but, I was trying to, one of the things that I got early was, I was always told, try and play in the biggest, best competition you could. In any week, try and find who, and look at players who are better than you. I've always had this instilled in me. If you're going to get better, watch guys that are better than you and see what they're doing better than you to make you, better. And I say you can only play in competition against better players to make yourself a good player. So I was always trying to find the best tournament or the best thing to do in a particular week off. Now, I used to hack off a lot of people because I turned down a lot of stuff, and in the end, again, this is not a terrible thing, but just a consequence of you playing in the UK. At 16, I've now stopped playing. I won the British Boys. I never went back to defend. I had to go, but they made me bring the trophy back. And I sort of had to turn up at, I'm going to say it was like Formby, the next year to hand the pro, and you could see them looking at you going, with all the RNA guys and all the amateur people, waving their fingers at you, saying, you should be playing here. And they said, well, no, I've got something else to play. And, I give up. And
you've got the Eisenhower Trophy, haven't you then?
Well, the Eisenhower hadn't happened yet. This was probably going to be like October later this year. So this was, halfway through the season, I had to sit down and basically, and I mean, I was doing this, I was making these decisions myself as well. There was no managers looking after you and entourage looking after you. You had to sort of see what you wanted to do yourself. So I literally, in one fell swoop, stopped playing any boys golf or any boys youth senior or club country, county, province, all this sort of, and GB&I and youth golf, and was only now doing, so at 16 I was only doing senior golf. So that was a great relief in a way, because that allowed me to play in all the biggest, best competitions without interference. So I go over to the British youths. I think was round about the last tournament I played in at Troon, and I remember these officials coming out to play, because you always used to know who the officials, the team captains for Walker Cup, Eisenhower and stuff like this. And my own team captain was a legendary Irish amateur, Joe Carr, who won everything. And Joe was great with me, and he was a sort of really good guide for me. And he said, at some stage we're going to come out and watch you this afternoon, all the four heads of all the, the picking committee and stuff. And anyway, don't I chip in at the first hole they come out to, I chip in, then the par 3, 14th of June, hit it into 20 feet hole, it had a good drive up the next, chip it from down left at 17, hard chip up stone dead, nice drive up 18, hit the green. And Joe comes on and says, I think that'll do it. I think that... And they said, you're going to be in the Eisenhower. Now, the significance of that, although people won't know, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is that most people, because the Eisenhower is the 4-man stroke play team, it was the big thing, where the Walker Cup is a probably more recognised thing. So people tended to do the Walker Cup first, and then, Eisenhower would come later. Where I did it the other way around, I made it onto the Eisenhower team, which was fantastic because it was at Pinehurst 2. So I made it the Eisenhower team, and then the Walker Cup the next year. So ours about faced a little bit, but got there in the end. But, the whole thing was at that stage then, because I was then on the most senior team, the biggest team you could be put on for GB and I, that was me done with all the sort of boys youth golf, and it was only senior stuff after that. And, there's stuff every week. I mean, people forget there's matches all the time. The only unfortunate thing at that stage, and I still have, when I speak to young amateurs who are looking to turn pro and stuff that are playing golf for the country, is it's all match play. There's maybe more stroke play and stuff now. A few of the championships are now stroke play, but it was all match play. And, I didn't want to, I was going to be a pro. There's no match play in pro golf, and I only wanted to play stroke play. And that's what always caused a bit of conflict with me and my, the officials and stuff.
And what was it like going over to Pinehurst for the Eisenhower? And then obviously, am I right in thinking it was Cypress Point for the Walker Cup the following year? Was that your first taste of competitive golf in America and your first time stateside seeing the kind of talent pool over there?
Well, actually, strangely, no, because I'd also gone over early in the year to play in something like the North-South Amateur, which at the time was like the equivalent of their American amateur stroke play. And I'm trying to think where it is. Somewhere maybe Philadelphia
event,
or something,
isn't it? The North-South Amateur. Events in the States. I thought that was at Pinehurst.
Yeah. This year it was at Pinehurst. Yeah, I think recently.
It wasn't there. It was definitely at some Parkland golf course somewhere. I'm going to say something at Minnetonka Golf Club or something comes to mind. Anyway, and it was the who's who of golf. Hal Sutton was there, Jay Siegel, the whole lot of them there. So I got introduced to these guys quite early, and I ended up playing a few other club events. Went to playing some club 36 hole or somewhere, and had about 3 weeks playing in America. So that was about it. But the only time you saw foreign players was at the British Amateur. And so again, I go back to the whole thing is that I only played in 2 British Amateurs. I got to think about the semi-final of one at Porthcawl, and then got beat in the first round of the shock horror. I got beat in the first round of the next one at St Andrews. But again, I was always turning pro. So a few months later, I was off to the pro game, so it didn't really matter. But those are the only time you saw the world elite. But at least I had a preview of what I knew I had to beat. But then it didn't really matter because I was going off to turn pro. And the American team was Hal Sutton, Holtgreave, Siegel, Jay Siegel, and Bob Tway. I think I played with Bob in the last round of it. I finished 4th in the stroke, because there's a stroke play element. The Eisenhower is your 4-man team, 3 best scores to count every day. And I finished 4th in the individual behind, I think Hal won it and Bob Tway was maybe 3rd, and then I was 4th. So I had a sort of inkling that I could survive in this level. So, again, these are drivers for people. If you're not learning from doing stuff like this and you're not seeing what you're doing, again, I was a great, and I still am a great watcher of people, golfers on the range, or seeing what they do to make you better. So, I was going up there. I mean, TC Chen, who then went off to, playing the PGA Tour and nearly won the US Open a few years later, was there, and all that sort of stuff. So, and then loads of guys that you remember being out there. Jimmy Gonzalez from Brazil was there, and he ended up playing the PGA Tour. So I got to watch good players, seeing what they were doing. So when I went home, it was, what am I going to work on? What am I going to do next? What's my next big tournament I could get into? So it was always a learning process for me doing all this stuff.
And one question I've got to ask you about, the Walker Cup at Cypress Point. Obviously, I mean, we a decent portion of our listenership, they're huge enthusiasts of course architecture, and I guess in recent years, the rankings of golf courses have become more widely publicized, and everyone's aware that Cypress Point is almost always in the top 2 spots. But as a young 17-year-old playing in a prestigious event like the Walker Cup there, when you went there, were you aware at the time of just how good a golf course it was, and you were almost on like hallowed turf, or are you just thinking, this is another day at the office in competitive golf, really?
I'm going to say a bit of all of those. I mean, in Ireland, all the 4 provincial championships are all played on our greatest links courses. And I'd won at 16. I'd won the Irish Championship at Royal County Down. The north of Ireland was at Portrush. The south was at Lahinch. Sligo was played as well. And you were playing all your inter-club matches at. We used to play quite a lot at Royal County Down, but you'd also play over the winter down at Portmarnock and Royal Dublin. These were standard golf courses. When you turned up at Cypress Point, it was just another, an American linksy golf course. I mean, a hell of a track. I suppose the big eye opener, of course, was at Cypress. Was, though you'd seen pictures of the 16th, you weren't quite prepared for when you walked around the corner and stood on the tee what sort of fearsome a hole it was.
Extreme?
And at those days, you've got to remember, it was 225 yards, and that was nearly a driver.
Yeah. Players.
Crappy piece of wood and a dodgy golf ball. It didn't go.
Yeah.
It didn't go very.
A coastal breeze, just kind of nice climber.
Well, actually, strangely, I digress, as I will do many times, off to a little side story. But I mean, one of the days you had to hit it left onto the little island to lay up, because you got to remember, you didn't get free golf balls or anything like that. And I remember standing there sort of winging driver and winging on the thing, and then reloading and hitting it left and thinking, well, I'm not going to lose the third, and we did a bit of foursomes practice, and my mate hit it over to the left-hand side, so we chipped it on. I mean, it's one of the few times I've ever seen anyone lay up on a par 3, but you didn't really understand this, because we'd played the amateur because you played at St Andrews, and I'd played. You mentioned I qualified for the Open. Yeah, at the time I qualified for the Open at Muirfield, the one that Tom Watson won as a 16-year-old amateur, and so you were playing in big tournaments on big golf courses, the world's best golf courses, and so going to Cypress Point was fabulous, but wasn't that big a deal. I mean, yes, it is now. And actually, fortunately, if when the world opens up a bit, I've been invited back to go and play. So hopefully I'll get back to. And I've actually been back before when I played my last US Open at Pebble Beach. I got asked up to the Golf Cup, and again, that's another story. But anyway, that's another lifetime ago. But so you went over and you played, but I mean, we were going to get hammered. I mean, we arrived over, and again, it's the who's who of American golf: Hal, Jay, Siegel, guy called Dick Von Tacky, who had actually won that North-South Amateur, Ron Comans, who was a best player, Corey Pavin, and stuff on the team. I mean, we were going to get slaughtered, which we did, but that was it. But I'm turning pro 2 weeks later. This is literally my last-ish amateur event. So, in the end, it was do your best and go and get on with it. I mean, Philip Walton and I had a great match on day one. We were the lead foursomes match out against Hal Sutton and Jay Siegel, who were the two, 1 and 2 world amateurs, not just American best, world amateur best. And we were 3 down after 3. Looked like you could see everyone looking old, anyway, we clawed our way back. And people won't know that the 15th at Cypress Point is also a par 3. There's 2 par 3s in a row. 15's a short one, and then you walk around the corner, and 16 is this one out onto the cliff. I hit it on the front edge at 15, but Philip's already up by the green. As I get up there, he holds it from off the green for a 2 to us to go like 2 up or something. And then at 16, Philip hits it just on the side of the green, and I chip in for a 2. So we go 2-2 to beat, after being 3 down after 3 to beat Howe and Jay 3 and 2 in the end. So
these clutch chip-ins, they seem to feature in every story.
Well, it was one of the few points we won that week. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I've always had a decent short game, but because you used to practice, that was a thing, because it's something that you don't see. I mean, I know it's probably very childish these days, but the best practice you could do was competitive practice. And so, I was lucky. Warren Point had a whole bunch of good juniors. And so we used to play all the time, roll around, golf, hit some balls, do this. But you'd end up chipping and putting against each other, having competitions. And so you used to have to be a great chipper and putter to, win your 1p bet money.
I mean, it's the story of junior golf, isn't it?
Well, and I mean, you go into a range anywhere, there's 30 people hitting balls and one guy putting. And then they all complain that they're not good on the short games.
I was born in 86. Bruce, you were born in?
95.
95. I remember playing a load and load of junior opens as a kid. And you'd play 36 holes, you'd be given £5. That would cover all your sort of Coca-Colas and Mars bars to get you through the day. And then, afterwards, my mum would still be on the car park waiting to pick me up, and I'd be there chipping in the dark, for pound coins and all that sort of stuff. And that was the perfect education, really. He says that now with a disgraceful short game, to be fair. So I've got to, maybe it hasn't worked out for me. But
yeah, because you're not doing enough of it. But if you want to...
But you see it now. What's today's age doing? The kind of the next generation, of Ronan Rafferty is probably now spending a lot of time crafting their long irons, because maybe there's so much emphasis now on, distance, flight control with the ball, and all the disciplines around it. And I suppose, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but...
The thing that gets me is that I'm not too sure how much of a golf game you learn hitting a ball into a net 5 feet in front of you. And a lot of them seem to be hitting golf balls into nets and stuff and in rooms. Yeah. And you're sort of thinking, if the weather's bad, does that mean if you're leading the Open by 2, you're not going to play in the last day because the weather's bad or something? You got to learn how to play in all the elements. I mean, I remember standing on a range, 14, chucking it down, soaking wet, and car park empty and you sort of stuff, because that's what you had to do, because the whole system seems to be this is a whole different story, but the system seems to be wrong. They're also mollycoddled these days that if the weather's bad, the scoring doesn't count, or the standard scratch goes up and all that sort of stuff. Well, we didn't have that luxury. Every shot counted. And the old days of the handicap system, where you used to have to do it in sequences. So once you were getting down from 5 to 4, you had to do 7 cards, of which 2 had to be at a new golf course or a different golf course under the standard scratch. And if you look, going out of your sequence, you had to start again and all this sort of stuff to get down and down. And by the time, because when Philip, I got to scratch for getting onto the Eisenhower team, it was an honorary position. Your county awarded you scratch. You didn't literally get the scratch. You were 1, and depending on what you did, you got awarded. And when I turned pro, and Philip and I were playing in the Walker Cup, I got given +2 for playing, +1 for playing in the Eisenhower, and +2 for playing in the Walker Cup. And Philip got given +1 for playing in the Walker Cup, and we were the only 2 plus handicappers in the country, in the whole country.
That's incredible.
I think that's how it should be, actually, though, because obviously the new world handicap system's been introduced fairly recently, and you look at it now and you're like, the idea, it's almost as if what was scratch under the old system, which admittedly was nowhere near as demanding as the system that you've just described, Ronan. I mean, it's now going to be a case of like the old scratch was is equivalent to +4 in new money, and you can go and play 9 holes around your home course and they'll just double that and hand that in as a counting card. I think I understand where they're going with it and that they want to broaden participation and make the game more accessible, but I definitely think, if you're a category 1 golfer, handicaps below 5, you're going to have to be putting a lot of time into the game anyway, and I don't know why they've cheapened the lower end of the handicap system as much as they have, because as you mentioned there, I think playing to around about par away from your home club first time seeing the course is probably the best test of a good golfer, and that just doesn't seem to count for anything anymore now.
Well, back in the day, I remember being on the sequence to get down, I think from 2 to 1, and the Royal County Down Scratch Trophy was on 36 holes on a Sunday at Royal County Down, and it was the hardest course in the country, and you had to work out whether or not you wanted to go and play, because if you broke your sequence you had to start all over again. And I mean, in those days, if a standard scratch of a golf course was over the par of the golf course, it was difficult. You went to the Litton Trophy in April, par 72, standard scratch 72. You used to, you'd shoot 75, 72, 74, 71 and win, and be 6 over par or something for the tournament in those days. Where today you get your handicap cut by 2. You suddenly go from down, and somebody would think you were good. I mean, I remember being in the last group, I think of that's how I met Roger Chapman on the first tee on Stanton for the Brabazon Trophy, and I'd shot like 72, 74 first 2 rounds, and we were tied lead. You wouldn't, you wouldn't make the cut and this sort of stuff. And I remember, I think I went out of sequence as well. I shot, 74 something in the morning, on the Saturday morning, and lost my sequence. I was devastated that I lost my sequence, and wasn't going to get down to 1 or something like that. And I'm still leading. And you think, and then I shot 69 in the afternoon and ended up winning. But you see it these days where, say, on a windy day, suddenly the standard scratch of some golf course is 76, par 71, standard scratch 76, and these guys are shooting 73, 74 and think that they're stars because they're getting a handicap cut. Well,
it's like, how could you get to +7, back in your day? I mean, there's some actual +7, +8 handicaps now, and that just did not exist 20, 30 years ago.
As I said, scratch was an honorary position, plus was an honorary position. So, that was as good as you were going to get. I mean, you couldn't. Literally physically impossible. And it is impossible as well. I mean, there's not a pro with that. If you took pro handicaps, you see, Terrell and Rory and stuff with the boys, their stroke average is 68, which is probably -3.5 for most of the golf courses. Well, so how can you tell me some amateurs +7 handicap?
Yeah, agreed. Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. So what was the question?
No, I can't remember. The question was ages ago, that one. I think that was how you got into golf. So I think it would be a kind of neat segue. You touched on it there, talking about people like Rory and Tyrrell, and maybe talk about your own kind of route into the professional game. So, you played through an era that was, really exciting. Like the your peers of the day and out on the European tour. I mean, as someone who can't remember the European tour very well from when he was very young, and some of it was before I was born, it feels like it was a very, very different European tour to what exists today, because, it really was sort of, it was not that it's not top tier golf now. I'm probably going to be careful what I say, but,
no,
it was a different game, wasn't it? And you had people around you that were, they're playing with the world's best people like Seve, Ollie, Faldo, all of those guys around. It must have been an incredibly exciting time.
Yeah. Well, when I turned pro October 81. Seve hit the circuit run in 76. We remember Birkdale, and then he won the following week in Holland. Faldo Lyle turned pro, I think 77, 78, because Faldo, I think, played in the Ryder Cup at Lytham, didn't he? 77. Sandy 78. He came on tour. So there was a progression here. Langer was out 79, I think, was when he sort of played. Tour. So these were, because there used to be a great golf magazine. I think it was Golf Illustrated that used to be out weekly with all the results and all the scores. So I remember, always rushing down to the golf club on a Friday to read the golf magazine to see what all the score was and who was playing. And these were, and golf wasn't on TV apart from the Open, the World Match Play. And even when the Masters started coming on TV, there was only the back nine for an hour on a Sunday was all you saw. So it was all still a bit of a mystery. But again, I'd played down in South Africa as a pro. I played the Open as a 16-year-old amateur. I also qualified, again, oh God, bloody hell. It's amazing how you remember stuff, amazing how you forget stuff. I qualified, I led they used to have Monday qualifying in those days, and I led the qualifiers for the Irish Open when I was 14. So I played in the Irish
14? What?
I just remember that because I played in 2, if not 3 Irish. I played in 3 Irish Opens before I turned pro, and I also, because the 6-man team from the Irish 6-man team used to get invited as well. So at 15, I was on the 6-man team, so we played, and then at 16, the winner of the Irish Amateur won. So the Irish Close finished on a Wednesday. Used to start on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I won the final on a Wednesday at Royal County Down. So literally get in the car, drive straight up to Dublin to peg it up the next morning in the Irish Open at Portmarnock, having not played a practice round or been up with it, and I made the cut as well.
Wow.
So I'd played a whole load of pro stuff. I knew these guys. Not new as still Mr. Ballesteros, so Mr. all that sort of stuff. But when I turned pro, I ended up being managed by IMG, Mark McCormick's group. But Roddy Carr, who was Joe Carr's son, who was my captain of the Irish team, managed me, and he had me under his wing, and he'd been a pro for a few years and stuff. So he got me on with IMG. So he was the one that sort of all the worldly advice. I mean, Joe had been great, I have to say. I mean, he was a tough guy and demanded lots of you. I mean, Joe would never let you play a match unless your golf shoes were clean. So Joe would come out, on the putting green and be like, "Well, boy, how are you putting?" And I go, "I'm putting okay." So, well, just make sure that those shoes are clean, and all this sort of stuff.
I like the sound of that. That sounds great.
Was demanding, but very respectful of the fact, because people didn't practice in those days. I mean, if you went 10 balls before you played, that was about as much as they do. Philip Walton and I would be out in the practice ground for hours. We used to go to training camp at Valderrama, and Philip and I'd be out hitting balls all evening and putting and chipping and stuff like that, and everyone else would be in the bar drinking and stuff like that. So there was a great respect. So when Roddy took me under his wing with IMG, lots of worldly advice on how you're going to be better, what are you going to do to be better. And it wasn't a matter of golf isn't all about hitting golf balls and stuff like that. If it was, there'd be lots of superstars, but it's about to me it's still all about learning and seeing what again, go back to the stuff I said earlier, who's better than you. Go and watch them. So, Roddy set me up with practice rounds with, Seve, Lyle, Faldo and stuff like that. And I didn't quite understand there was 2 reasons. First of all, go and learn. See what they're doing better than you. Learn from them. Ask them questions. Because they'll tell you. Pro golfers can't stop talking. You ask a pro golfer a question, and particularly, you're really good chipper, Seve. Tell me, of course I'm a good chipper. Yeah, of course I'll show you how to. There's always a bit of thing like that. But it was also so that you wouldn't be afraid of them when you then got drawn with them in the tournament, because you never used to get drawn with the top players unless you started winning tournaments. So you were always playing with people from the qualifying school or some other pro that you'd never heard of, and whatever it is. And unless you made the cut and then got drawn with somebody good, it was your first time playing with these guys. So Roddy didn't want me to be intimidated by playing with these guys in the 3rd round of the last round of the tournament. So by the time it then happened, and I'm going to say I got my 4th or 5th tournament, I've made the cut, I'm top 10 or something, and I get drawn with Seve in the 3rd round. I'm walking onto the tee going, "Hey Seve, you're right, how you doing?"
Yeah,
and I know that he didn't speak good.
It becomes easier.
He wasn't looking at you. Yeah, he wasn't looking at you going, who are you? I don't know how you doing. He was looking at you, doing this, and the same with the rest of them. And there was a great respect, because the circuit in those days was very much more like a circus. You know, it was a traveling circus. You know, you never used to go home in between the events, you know, because there was nowhere to go. You know, you used to stay out on tour and travel like a big caravan. You were getting lifts from people. You getting a train somewhere. You know, you were all piling on a bus going to some hotel to be then taken out on the tournament. Out to the tournament course, where again, you know, now it's they're on the 18th green, bringing their, you know, pilot, getting their plane readied, you know. So,
yeah, do you think that's changed quite a bit? Do you think in your day there was more camaraderie between the players and it was more friendly, or is that still the case today?
European tours always been friendly. The guys are still going out to dinner and stuff today. Now they might all be popping on separate private planes when they leave the tournament. Whatever, but they're still all chatting and getting together, and that was still the case. That is still the case, and was very much there. I mean, you were locked in. I mean, I remember my first sort of 4 tournaments was like Tunisia, Spain, Italy, France. You know, you were out on tour for a month. You were all, you know, 50 or 60 of you traveling in this big sort of circus to the events. So you were always dining together, practice rounds, meeting for lunch. I mean, there were no players' tents in those days or anything. There were no practice balls. You know, there were no practice balls in tour. I mean, practice balls didn't come in until like 88. So, you know, in those days, the only practice balls you had were from the balls that you were using the week before, or the ones that you'd used in practice ground. So you used to go onto the practice ground and hit 10 balls and then have to wait for your caddy to come back in to hit another 10, so you'd have time to chat. You were always in the clubhouse because you were fighting with the members of the whatever golf club you're at to get food. They said there were no players' lounges, and so you were always together. And that, you know, my endearing friendship is with Roger Chapman, and that's from over 40 years, and that's from, you know, being friends and playing and practicing together as, you know, young pros.
It seems like from that era there was a lot of people speak really fondly of different golfers from that era. Like everyone sort of talks, you know, about how great some, you know, people just talked about there. And also seems like there's some pretty strong rivalries. You think about maybe a few years later, but thinking about people like, you know, Nick and Greg and people like that. When you were out playing with those guys, who did you kind of look to, and was there anyone where you thought, yeah, geez, this guy can really hit a ball, like I'm almost in awe of this? Or, you know, was it...
Well, they all could. I mean, Greg came over, I think, around about 79, 80, and you've got this, you know, great-looking, really fit, blonde, you know, Australian bloke who hit the ball miles. Well, in those days, hit the ball miles. And then it was the arrival of a whole bunch of players coming over. I'm trying to think who would have been over. Would have been Freddie Couples. I mean, I remember coming over. Did he come over? Anyway, there was a whole bunch. You know, the world was changing. People were traveling. Our players were going down to South Africa to play for the winter, going to Australia to play. They were coming over the circuits because, you know, in those days, Australia, well, it still is a wraparound circuit. This November, December, January, February. So they used to either come to Europe or America. So a bunch of them coming over. That's how I became friendly with Ian Baker Finch, Wayne Riley, Wayne Grady. You know, all these guys, Mike Harwood and stuff, used to come over. Frank Nobilo, they came over early 80s. So, you know, so the game was changing quite quickly with the world shrinking, tournaments coming on. I mean, I'm trying to think, when was it? 88 was our first sort of non-European event, when I think we went to Dubai. And then Asia came on, the Johnny Walker in Asia came on the following year, and then linked, and all of a sudden there was this other bit of the circuit to go. And that's why I ended up going to Australia for the winter, because, you know, you needed to find somewhere to play golf, because there was more tournaments, there was more playing, it was more global. You needed to keep playing. You couldn't take 3 months off over the winter that you used to do in the early days. You used to have to keep playing, and the players were getting better and practicing more. You know, people were going to the gym, would you believe? You know, people were exercising, you know, what a novelty. And people were hitting golf balls. People were getting better. Seve wins the Masters. You know, the players were doing well in America. Faldo went over, I think, 84-ish or something, and won in the States and stuff. So, you know, the whole game was getting more global, getting better. Players were getting better. So to succeed, you had to join. I mean, the whole thing about golf is if you're standing still, you're going backwards. So you had to join them, and so, you know, you ended up playing more tournaments. I mean, one year I played like 42 tournaments.
That's nuts. That's huge.
You know, I literally didn't go home, you know, and you're doing your laundry. You know, you used to get to a hotel on a Monday and basically hand them your suitcase and say, please launder that, you know, and can I have it in my room? You know, that's how
Im's famous, isn't he, for playing almost every available event today. Sanjay Im will play. Like, he doesn't mind just hopping from town to town on the PGA. And I think in a good year, he'll rack up like, you know, 38, 39 starts. So, I mean, 42, that's insane when you think about it.
And that's with, you know, no private planes or no, you know, it was trying to live on
legwork, yeah.
And getting, you know, driving to tournaments, you know, all this sort of stuff. But it was, you know, it was great and you know, great learning experience. I mean, I'm talking about this now and I'm sort of actually remembering it a bit more. I mean, you've asked me a question that's got me talking on this subject, but you know, it was great days and great learning, and the players today have no clue, you know, that, you know, and the other little things, you know, if you used to get, when you used to get given golf balls, you know, you turn pro and all of a sudden some company would give you a Titleist Dunlop in those days, would give you golf balls and whatever it is. You used to get 3 golf balls, and if you made the cut, you got another 3.
Oh my word.
You know, and you had to be really careful if you went to a difficult golf course that you didn't lose golf balls. I mean, that's why, you know, people never used to lose golf balls in those days because you couldn't afford to, you know, because you used to nearly have to play all 18 holes with a ball.
And a Bellata in those days,
That's
you know,
incredible.
you shred them as well, wouldn't you? You could shred them quite quickly.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing with Titleist in those days. Old Bellata, if you had you know, and there was a real problem when square grooves came in. You know, ping berylliums and stuff like that. You'd be afraid to hit a wedge because that was a golf ball gone. You know, so you'd be picking the stuff off to try and make it flatter and all this. And one glove
of the golf industry was just under threat. That's just incredible.
Well, I played for GB and I down at Ferndown. We had a thing, the Hennessy Cognac Cup, great event, little team event against the best in the world, and so there was maybe 4 or 6 teams or something down at it, and I remember the I'm going to say Titleist representative coming up to me and saying, you know, had I got my 3 balls, and did I want a new glove? You know, and being able to try on a new glove, and that was my glove for the 4 rounds, you know, and all that sort of stuff. It was great. That was great.
And I guess, I mean, looking forward ahead, just to I guess dive into that subject a little bit more. Do you think Tiger, could you really boil it down to sort of his impact and how golf ended up becoming, you know, getting to this point where, you know, even amateurs at Open qualifying were being given, you know, new shoes, a couple of gloves, dozens of balls, you know, in the sort of mid 2000s?
I think one of these things is it's a bit like, you know, technology and stuff that changes the game drastically. You know, Pro V1 came in, and suddenly the game, you know, graphite shafts, the length of graphite shafts, you know, titanium came in. You know, there's game changers, and the game was changing pretty quickly in those days. You know, you go away for a winter and there'd be a new bit of technology from the States and stuff. I mean, you wouldn't get it for another 6 months in Europe, but, you know, you'd be reading about these new clubs or drivers or balls or whatever it is that were coming. So, I mean, you know, when was it? So, I mean, Tiger didn't turn pro till what, 97 or something, or end of 96.
Yeah, 96, yeah.
Was. So, I mean, I'd nearly retired by then. That's how long ago that was. And so, you know, Seve was the first, I think, big kicker. You know, he introduced, you know, he had the swashbuckling way. He you know, a new generation to the game. You know, Greg introduced all the young Australian players to the game. You know, there'd been, you know, Jack was still playing and going out to, you know, Johnny Miller, 74, 76, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, his run, you know, this blonde bombshell shooting 63 every time he was playing. And so there was always something to kick you on about the game. Then I said we were talking about Fowd O'Neill, then Elizabeth came on, you know, Langer was winning, then they were winning majors, they were going to play, because, you know, up until I won the order, sorry, I know I'm going to brag here, you know, up until I won the Order of Merit, you know, the only major I played in was the Open Championship, and that was, you know, my first major outside the Open was 1990.
Wow,
and you'd been on a really good spell for a long time, hadn't you? So, and I guess, was that just the nature of the way the events were selected in the States to get into things like the Masters?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that, these guys were playing in the States in the US PGA and the US Open. So there was always that driver in the background of that, if I do well, this is what I'm going on for. And I've always been quite driven in that way. And so, I always had this goal that I wanted to get into all these. This was the realm I wanted to get into. So, you watched them play on TV. More and stuff was going to be on TV. You went to watch tournaments. You played with these players, and then the next week they were going off to a major, and that was the driver for me. So, there was very quick successions in the game to lead you to where you were going, but. It was still a bit of a thing, because I remember getting, when I what did I do? So I won my first thing was Aaron. We won the Dunhill in 1988 at St Andrews, which is a great tournament, team event, 3-man team, and myself, Eamon Darcy, Des Smith beat Australia in the final on the Sunday, and we won, and we were heroes and revered in Ireland and stuff. And then I flew home on the Sunday night, and I played in this great little tournament. I wish they'd do it now, which you qualified for throughout the season for making birdies and eagles. And the top 30 players went to play in this thing called the Equity and Law Challenge at Royal Mid Surrey. And it was 54 holes. And the only scores that counted were birdies and eagles. You couldn't lose a point. You could only gain. And I remember I made 19 birdies and an eagle in 54 holes, and won the tournament. It was my first sort of solo success, having just won the weekend before the Dunhill with Ireland, and then going to the tournament the next week, and I was now getting 12 balls and 2 gloves.
You keep linking it back to this, Ronan. I don't know. I think there's an obsession in there. Have you not got enough golf balls at home now? Is that it keeps coming up now?
No. Well, no. I mean, now I don't even play tournaments these days, and I still get 24 dozen and 12 gloves sent to me every 6
That's the remarkable thing, isn't it?
That's a lot. That's a year's supply of golf balls with the manufacturers. 24 dozen, isn't it? That's like what they give you. And you think you're going back to playing 42 tournaments a year and getting a sleeve.
Yeah, I mean, they chuck them out like confetti these days. I mean, and what's even terrible? I mean, the guys don't even, if they hit it in the rough in a practice round, they don't even bother looking for it. Where we'd have hoped around and found it, none of this 5-minute stuff. You'd have been in there hacking out trees, kind of thing. But
you've been there till dusk, just trying to find it. Yeah.
And so you don't really realize that it's changing, but it just does. And then and then when you went to the Masters again, I've arrived over to Augusta. I've actually played the week before. At Bay Hill was my sort of first introduction to the States. Although at this stage, I'd already played odd things like the International and the Canadian. I didn't play it in the end, but the Canadian Open always wanted me to go and play and all this. So because of the Irish connection, they always wanted myself and David Faherty to go and play. So I played in a few events in the States, and you were playing I won the Venezuelan Open and stuff quite early. You're playing a bit in South America. There was always, I'd been to Australia at this stage, South Africa over the winter. So you were well traveled, and you're going down to play. But I arrived at Bay Hill, and you were given a key to your locker. It was all fantastic. You walk in, and there was 36 balls and 6 gloves in your locker, and it was like. And you were storing them away, saying, "Oh, I'll put a dozen away. I won't need those, and I'll take 2 gloves, and I'll use those next week." And all this sort of stuff. And then you arrived at Augusta, and there's 4 dozen in your locker, and a dozen, and there's reps trying to give you gear and stuff like that. It was paradise, and but again, I'm having a bit of a laugh here, but it's one of these things. It's because you got so little when you played on the European tour. And these guys were given so much that it was like, yeah, I want to play in America because you get all this gear, get all these shafts, get all these companies, all these tour vans, all the tour vans, all the wedges and putters that we had, golf balls to try, gloves to wear and stuff like that. It was just it was like a kid in a candy shop time.
I bet.
Not wanting to generalize too much, but from what you're saying there, Ron, it sounds like this recent argument about, obviously there's been news around the PGA Tour acquiring a stake in the European Tour and a seat on the board, and whether the PGA Tour is just vastly outstripping the European Tour in terms of prestige or prize money. But to an extent, it seems like, from what you're saying there, that it's maybe always been the case that there's been more money and more lavish accessories going along with the PGA Tour, even from your days playing in the 80s. It seems like there was a lot more there in the way of free equipment and sponsors benefits, that kind of thing.
Well, America's always sort of in a way been bigger than better. The stories of I own a ranch. Mine's 3,000 acres. Mine's 30,000 acres. The bigger the better in the States. But I think it's one of these things. It's like, what pushes you along as a pro golfer? Of course, prize money does, prestige does, beating the best in the world. So when the World Golf Championship came along, I think they were the big push, because suddenly the prize money in those was more than the majors. Now, the majors, of course, more prestigious. And you'd always want to win a green jacket or a Claret Jug. But in the end, if you went and won a World Golf Championship and won $1 million in, whenever it was, 1999 was about the first World Golf Championship, and the winner got $1 million. The winner of the Open only got 200,000.
Yeah.
And, or not even probably in those days, 200,000. So there was always this sort of thing about, they're all in the States, and players were going to play in them, the best in the world going to play in them. So, what drove you as a pro golfer? You turn pro to make money and play, whatever it is. So it's always in the back of your mind that you wanted to play in the biggest events and with the most money. So, the States always had that. And there was always this thing where in the background, that certainly for the foreign players, certainly from the warm countries, Oregon and Australia, these guys were only using the European Tour as a stepping stone to get to the PGA Tour. And so once they started traveling more and playing more and getting into the majors and doing well, and the world ranking came in and stuff, the more that these players sort of came and went. They played for a few months, and all of a sudden they're on the PGA Tour, and they were winning millions and winning tournaments and winning majors and winning this and that. And so this was what's building up on the tour. I've never quite understood why. I mean, it's only now that we're having big tournaments. I mean, these Rolex events, what they play in Saudi last week for $8 million. That's a regular
for the winner. Crazy.
It's a regular PGA Tour event in a week. I mean, you see the Greater Milwaukee Open's $9 million. And so you can understand why these days that they're not traveling. Well, the players are not traveling. You can see why Rory and the others want to play in the States. I mean, there's always a bit of a thing where you want to, support your home tour and stuff. But the game is so more global at the moment that these guys are chasing the money. I remember that when the first $1 Million Classic came in, $1 million prize fund back in the, I think it was probably the late 80s, was a giant. I mean, when I played in my first European Tour event, the prize money in Tunisia, the total prize money was $100,000. Winning prize was 10,000. And, my fourth or fifth tournament out, I finished fourth and I won 900 quid.
It's like it's so far. It's like night and day from what we're talking about today. And I seem to remember when we had Clates on, he was talking about Portugal, wasn't he, Bruce? With similar stuff in terms of prize money. And then you can't blame them, can you? Really? I mean, was Jacklin? I might be getting wrong. Was Jacklin the first to play out in the States quite heavily, or?
Yeah, he was one. Well, when he won the US Open at Hazeltine, he was out. But Oosterhuis as well was out there, and then they used to come back and play a bit on the tour. But he was the first one that sort of made global money. But there wasn't any money to be playing for in Europe and stuff. And actually, strangely, in the midst of all this, you just reminded me of something. There used to be quite the tour used to run all these Monday pro-ams to sort of keep the players occupied. And you used to, this is the early to mid 80s, and there was about a dozen of them, most of them in the UK, but some of them in Europe. And you used to get £200 to play in them. First prize was maybe 1,000. And second was 500, and then everyone else got £200. Well, £200 more than paid for your week on tour. So they used to get great fields playing in them because players were basically making their expenses for the week. And if you had a good, shot 64 on summer, you won $1,000. Well, $1,000 was more than you got for finishing fourth in the tournament the week before. So and I say it goes on. But I mean, now guys drop 200 quid on the floor and don't even pick it up. So the game has changed completely. But I mean, for the good, it's sounding like I'm sort of reminiscing here with a chip on my shoulder, but I'm not at all. It was what it was in the days, and the players, the good players who were playing in Europe, Sevis, Fowlers, Lyles, and Langers and stuff, they were pushing the game up in Europe, so the prize money was getting bigger. The game was getting more global, so we were getting more sponsorship, and the game was getting bigger. We then start winning the Ryder Cup in 85 and beyond. The game kicks on again. The players are traveling, they're winning majors, the game kicks on again. And all of a sudden, every season there's something that's moving the game forward. It happened to move forward an awful lot quicker in America, particularly the prize fund, because they very much, tournaments were fighting against each other for having bigger and better tournaments, bigger and better fields, where that didn't seem to be a thing in the States. You used to go and play in tournaments because you liked them. One of the nicest tournaments we used to play on tour was the Jersey Open, because Jersey's a beautiful place. It was one of the few tournaments that I used to travel to, on a Monday and then stay on the Monday afterwards, because it was a lovely island to be on. It was one of the worst prize monies. I mean, we used to only play for 150, 200,000 or something, but you didn't care because it was a beautiful place. Croix-sur-Sierre, not the best golf course in the world, but it was a lovely place to be up in the Swiss Alps. And so you used to go and enjoy a weekend, up in the sky. I ended up winning the tournament down the line. I mean, it's a beautiful place, absolutely fantastic golf course. But you know what I mean? It's just that it wasn't, the prize money wasn't the be end and end all of everything. And then suddenly, say these World Golf Championships come in, and there were millions of dollars, and so everything got uprated and whatever it is. But it's taken a little bit of a while. But if you see that. Even a small tournament, I mean, it's really hard to think, but I mean, up until a load of years ago, the Dubai Desert Classic was one of the best tournaments to play in because of where it is, and at the time of year, but had literally the worst prize money on tour. But they realized that they didn't have to have big prize money to attract the players, because the players went because they wanted to go. And it's not until other Emirates came in, Qatar, Saudi, Abu Dhabi and stuff, they started coming in, where they started vying with each other for players, and all of a sudden, to attract players, you have to have better prize money, and then so that's why that increases. That then increases everyone else, and off the run. So the good thing at the moment is it looks like it's an upward spiral for the players. I mean, it'll end up having to stop somewhere, because imagine if you suddenly came up and sponsored a 10 million tournament or something, and half the world's players didn't turn up, you'd be fairly hacked off. So there's something has to be done about attracting players to events that have some sort of prestige, because the majors are there, the World Golf Championships are there, and I hear that there's a sort of muting of getting the world's best players together in a bit more of a league and stuff like that. That might be attractive, but then who are the attractive players at the moment? Still Tiger, still Phil. They're towards the end of your career. You need new players. I don't know. It's just one of these things. But the game has become so more global that I think that people will, once the world's in a better place, I think people will come out of the woodwork and want to have big standalone tournaments to attract the best players. Media is so easy these days. They can streamline events on your phone. People can sit and watch. You can click in and watch a player. You can pay to watch a player, follow a group, all this sort of stuff. This is coming in the game of golf.
Yeah, just dive into your European tour career a little bit more, because am I right in thinking that pretty much from the moment you turned pro, you were a kind of a regular feature and top 30 player, top 20 player on the European tour from the get-go, I guess, for all the reasons you outlined earlier. But you didn't get your first win till May 1989 in the Italian Open, after which they just started coming thick and fast, and you racked up loads between 89 and the early 90s. What do you think made a difference there in terms of going from being like a regular feature to winning events and going on and making the Ryder Cup team and so on?
Two things happened quite quickly together. One was that I took myself off to Australia for the winter. 87, 88, a lot of the Australian guys were over. They kept saying, come down and play, great courses, great events, all this sort of stuff. So went down and played there. And I mean, I've always been a sort of fairly heavy bloke, and diet was never the best thing for me and whatever it is. So I went down, trained and exercised. I mean, there's great food down there. There's fresh food, there's fresh fruit. There's no... Because it's hot and stuff, you don't end up eating crap, basically. Chocolate, crisps, biscuits, all that stuff. You're drinking lots of water and looking after yourself. So I started training, playing more. You're playing and practice and stuff. And then, even in those days, you couldn't afford to come home, and there wasn't much point coming home for 6 weeks for the break. So I ended up staying over there for Christmas and New Year, which was great in hindsight. You're playing, practicing all winter instead of coming back here and doing nothing. And then, I won the, I think it was the South Australian Open. How's this for a one? I win a tournament that I was disqualified from. How about that?
How does that work?
You'd have to talk us through that one.
Right. Very, very quick.
That seems like an appropriate
segue.
Very,
very quickly on this one, if I can. In those days in Australia, you had to register for a tournament by 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, or if you didn't pre-registered and sort of ticked the box and sort of signed in, they automatically disqualified you for it. But this tournament that we went to play in was a Wednesday, Saturday event, and I never thought about it. So I had a day off, and I thought I'll go out for the Pro-Am tomorrow and I'll register before I play. And I get a phone call at 5:05 to say, Ronan, sorry, you've not registered, you're disqualified. But you're all right, because one of the prime players as well hasn't done it. So we're going to sign it for you, but be out for the Pro-Am and whatever it is. So I then went and won the tournament, and at the prize given, the sponsor, the guy, the fellow that promoted the tournament, who's beside me, nudging me, he said, don't mention the fact that you got the score. You were technically disqualified and stuff like that. So anyway, so I won a tournament that I got disqualified from. And then we had the winter off, played and practice, and you're playing with good players. We had rented a house up in the Gold Coast where all the best, Finchy, Peter Senior, Peter Fowler, all these guys were living. So you played golf at Roger Davis. You were playing golf with in good company every day. And so that when you get back onto the circuit, when it started again, middle of January, you were just off and running, and I won the New Zealand match play, and I won 3. Can't think of the other one. And so I went back to Europe, started playing well. We won the Dunhill, equity law, that thing at the end of 88. I was maybe 15th in the order of merit or something in Europe. The next season, lots of top 10s to start with. And then we go to Italy, and I shoot 65 in the last round, win the Italian Open. And that was it. I was off and running. A week or so later, Faldo and I had a bit of a shootout at Woburn for the British Masters. Both shot the tournament record. He beat me by 2, but we both beat the tournament record by about 5. Week later, or a few weeks later, I get beaten in a playoff for the Dutch. Lazabel and I, we have nine playoff holes. Would you wait? 9-hole playoff. Beats me in the Dutch. Yeah. I think it's still the longest playoff the European Tour. Oh, probably even in the world, but certainly European Tour. Yeah, 9-hole playoff at Kennemare for the Dutch, and then the very next week I shoot 129 over the weekend and win the Scandinavian.
And is that just success kind of breeds success, and you're really confident and?
Well, golf is a game like that. Golf. Yeah, all this sort of stuff about saying it's all skill and whatever it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, but if you haven't got the confidence to do it, you're never going to. That's why you see so many players come in and out of the game and also win and then disappear and all this sort of stuff. And a lot of it has to do with how you handle the aftermath of winning and what's happening with it, because all of a sudden, the time's not your own. You're wanting to be interviewed pre-tournaments and everyone wants to speak to you, and you're going to get in majors. And those, that was a Ryder Cup year, 89. So like from May, I'm number one in the order of merit. So they want to fit me for my clothing for the Ryder Cup in September, and I won't have any of it. There's a tent every week for, to get in, get measured and whatever. And I won't go in because, I'm saying, well, I'll wait till I'm on the team and all that. And they're sort of trying to tell me, oh, well, the gear needs to be made a month in advance. And, once you make the team in those days, because it was about a month in advance, you get sent all the gear to try and make sure that it fitted and all this sort of stuff. And I wouldn't have it. And I was just keen on playing in tournaments and doing well. You're playing in the Open, and suddenly, I got invited to the World Match Play as well, and then, invites from Japan, Australia, South Africa, other events, going to think corporate stuff, and so, that's what happens when you start winning tournaments. And again, sometimes people don't understand it. I mean, it's great seeing success. It's great seeing players doing this. And, it's different these days where there's lots of media and they're all going off and being interviewed and they're all doing this. But it takes its toll. And you can see from players where they can't handle the situation, and you need to have a good, strong management team behind you. And you need to be strong yourself and say no. You need to stick your hand up sometimes and say no, which in those days was difficult to do because it was all new. Everything was new. All these tournaments you were going on to were only stuff that you'd read about, not ever played in. So it was exciting to go to Japan for 3 weeks and then fly down to Australia for 2 and then go home for a week and then fly back to Australia for 1 and then go to South Africa and come back to Europe and go to Dubai and go on this, it was dead exciting and stuff. But, it takes its toll, as I said. But, well, then you've got to manage your schedule then after that, because all of a sudden, 1990, I'm now in all 4 majors, and I'm also wanted to, I win the Order of Merit, which I continue on the year. I win Valderrama at the end of the year and win the Order of Merit. And so you're being invited to the States. You can play in 7 tournaments on invites in America. You wanted in Australia, you wanted Japan. You're in the 4 majors. And you've got to try and do a circuit around these sort of things, which of course hack people off because I always wanted the major to be my 3rd tournament. I know that a lot of players like take the week off or maybe play the week before a major and whatever. But I always quite like playing a lot of golf. So I didn't want to go into one of these things cold because it was all new. And so, and again, people forget nobody was exempt in America like they are today from the world ranking and winning tournaments and whatever it is. Everyone was looking for an invite. So I'm vying for an invite along with Sevi, Faldo, Lyle, Langer, Lazabel, and a couple of Japanese guys and a few Australians, Greg and Wayne Grady and Baker Finch. And so I luckily, tournaments like Bay Hill were very keen to invite Europeans. So I got invited to Bay Hill. So was Houston because it was the Shell Houston Open. So they were quite keen to invite Europeans over. So I got a few starts beforehand. I mean, very few starts. I mean, I ended up playing most of my normal PGA Tour events after a major because everyone went home and they were delighted that you stayed, because I ended up playing like Atlanta Classic, MCI Heritage, the International at Castle Rock up in the hills in Colorado, or Castle Pines, I think it was. And so it was very different trying to get into these events and playing these things, and because you were then now missing tournaments that you had played in for 10 years in a row. Portuguese Opens, Italians Open, French, Irish Opens. The Irish Open used to be all around the US Open in June in those days. And I ended up missing a couple of Irish Opens because I'd stayed in America, which of course totally hacked them off for the fact that I'm coming home to play in my home tournament, that they felt it was a God-given right that I should. But things were different. You had to manage a schedule. There weren't private planes where you dived on a Sunday night and were landing, first thing on a Monday morning. You had to wait for a scheduled plane on you couldn't get out on a Sunday night. You had to wait till a Monday. You didn't get into Tuesday. All this sort of stuff. And I was trying to give myself always the best opportunity of doing well. So, I ended up staying in America, or you take a week off because you then have 3 or 4 other big tournaments in a row afterwards, leading to another major, because the majors were one after the other, June, July, August. And so you were going to the state, you're in the States in April. I turned down the Players twice, would you believe?
Unbelievable. Really? Was it just not as big an event then?
Well, no, it used to be in March, like it's gone back to now.
Of course.
And, we have a time where up until then, you didn't play any golf over the winter, and it was literally going to be your first. The European Tour back in the day didn't used to start till April, Easter.
Wow.
And so you weren't going to turn up at Sawgrass, having not played for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and at your first turn.
Yeah. Not the course you want to get into cold, I imagine.
Well, and also, I turned down the $1 Million Classic twice. How's that?
Really?
It didn't fit in, because you had you were over to the States for 2 or 3 weeks in April, then you were back to Europe to play May, then you were back to the US Open in June for a couple of weeks to the States, then back to for the Open in July, then back to the States in August for the US PGA. And so by the time that it was a real mess to try and do a schedule. And again, it's easy today. They 20 minutes after they're off the 18th green, they're on a plane.
Well, it's built for them, isn't it? The routing of where they go from tournament to tournament, the swings, and even the nature of the feeder tours and everything kind of cater for it. But you were what you're saying there is it almost is a bit of a watershed moment for the tours, I think, between European and across the ponds, the States, which is a pretty neat segue into the Ryder Cup. So obviously you've had Eisenhower Trophy at Pinehurst, you've played the Walker Cup at Cyprus, and then the big one now is the Belfry, which is a little bit of a UK course architecture sort of pun, but it was a massive event, right? That would have been first time that was aired, I think, in the States on TV. Like before, they'd never aired the Ryder Cup, overseas. The teams were incredible when you look at the sheet.
Yeah. It was great as well, playing in the Ryder Cup. I'd been on the team. I've got this lovely piece of glass. The amount of stuff you get given then was incredible. I hate to think the amount of stuff you get given now, but I've got this beautiful piece of cut glass that we got given by the tour or somebody, where it's the team in the order of how they made the team on the order of merit, and I'm number one.
Wow.
Wow.
But I'd been number one all season. And so I knew I was going to make the team, eventually get to try on all my gear and get fitted out and whatever it is. You arrive up at the Belfry, and it's very different because, we used to play European tour events in the continent where you'd have, a couple of hundred people watching you in France, or some remote course in, Tunisia. You'd arrive up and the only people watching you were a few guys on holiday, a few tourists that were out on holiday. And so all of a sudden you've turned up at the Belfry. There's only 12 of you playing a sort of 4-ball foursome for a little practice game with 55,000 people following you in one match.
Wow.
And huge grandstands. This was, in a way nearly bigger than the Open, because at least the Open, when the gallery were spread out, there'd be 55,000 people, but they'd be all out watching the good players and all spread out around the golf course. Well, here you are on the first tee with, Seve and Langer and Faldo playing a practice round, and 55,000 people, 8 deep, tee to green, wall to wall people. And this tight as well, the whole way up the hole, right along the edge, and you're thinking, if I get one slightly off the binding, I might take somebody's head off.
It's good to know that even a world-class golfer has those thoughts, right?
I'm more worried about the people will know what binding was. Do you know what binding was? You're too young. Do you know what binding
was? It's around the head, wasn't it? You used to have binding around the head of the driver.
Yeah. That's used to how a wood was attached to a shaft in those days, but anyway, that's how old it was. But so it was very different, and lots of egos on the team, lots of big players. And although you were I was number one and all this sort of stuff on the tour, I said there was still Seve, Faldo, Lazabel, Langer on the team, and so you were like in the next division, but below them.
They were the kind of sort of leaders and the talisman, really. Were they the ones kind of giving the team talks, or?
Well, the good thing was that and I mean, fabulous. And I have a huge amount of respect for Tony Jacklin. He was a fantastic captain and leader. He's having to deal with egos, huge egos. I mean, Sevi wanted to run the whole thing. Nick was doing his thing. Nick was, out on the range working and stuff, being very methodical. Bernard the same. Bernard's out there with a temperature gauge and a compass and plotting his way around what he was going to do on the golf course. Elizabeth had the best long game you've ever seen. Could hit a 1 iron to 10 feet from 220 yards out, beautiful short game as well. You had all sorts of things going on. And then there was us, Christy, myself, Gordon Brand Jr., who, God, I can't believe Junior's dead. Sevi's dead, yeah. Christy, Jr., my partner in the Saturday morning foursomes, Christy's dead as well. God, that's terrible to think of.
It's a sad reminder, isn't it? You're right. Yeah, when you say it like that. You're out playing all these little 9-hole practice matches, and Tony's moving people around, but there's a few set in stone games already. Sevi's going to play with Elizabeth. That's a set in stone. Nick and Woozy were a team. They're set in stone. So you knew there wasn't a lot of room to get in for a pairing. And Tony has sort of said, look, you're not going to play every day. I'm going to move you around, going to see how you do, see who you're comfortable with. And I end up playing with Langer, in the foursomes on the first match, which was, a place of honor, I thought, because, Bernard won majors at this time, winning order match, winning tournaments around the world. And so he's guiding me around, he's my sort of hand on the shoulder sort of player. We got beaten, you haven't got enough hours in the day for me to tell you that story.
No, go on. I'd be interested to hear that.
No, obviously, it's too long a story. But anyway, I always sort of say that Bernard had sort of plotted everything around. So it's a cold, misty morning and stuff, and we're walking down to the first tee, and oh no, I can't go on.
Anyway, you have to. We've heard so much about Langer, and there's obviously that famous Monty quote about the sprinkler head. Have you measured it from the front or the back of the sprinkler head? So I'd love to get your take.
Well, things like that are true. And look, I end up hitting the opening tee shot when I wasn't quite expecting to, and we're playing Mark Calcavecchia, who'd won the Open at Troon in July. And Ken Green, I don't know if people remember Ken Green, quite famous for wearing a green glove and green shoes and stuff like that. And Calcus, it's massive. I mean, you got to understand, this is like a TV production show that goes on. I mean, people think that the Ryder Cup's all about the players. It's not. It's all about television. And it's like a big TV production. Your name's called. There's the parting of the crowd, and you've moved down to the first tee, and 55,000 people are there, and there's cheering. There's cameramen diving on the ground in front of you, cameras in your side. There's 2,000 cameras on site, cameramen on site. There's 150 TV cameras. You're live to 1 billion people globally. And they're watching every move, and you walk down on the first tee, and it happens very quickly. It's all done, but Ivor's on the tee, and he's looking at you, and I've got the ball in my hand, and so he knows you're going to hit, and there's a nod and a wink, and it's okay, guys, and it's actions, lights, actions, go, like this sort of thing. I said, keep going, the TV thing, and Calcavecchia holds the head cover off this driver, and he's got a metal driver. He's got a tailor-made burner. I mean, we'd only read about these in a magazine. We didn't know they actually existed. And he's pulled it, and I'm like going, he's got a metal driver. It's like this here sort of thing. Shuffle, because the away team hits first, so he's shuffle. Doesn't he blooter one down the middle of the fairway? Absolutely rips one down on the tee. Ronan Rafferty, I'm shaking in my boots. I'm absolutely quick. The only thing, as hope you don't mind me saying, the only thing that's not moving are my bowels. And anyway, I end up, deep breaths, shove the tee in the ground. The ball sits on the tee, which is a result. My hands are shaking so much. I sort of take a few practice swings, and it's deathly silence. And I'm standing there thinking, oh God, any one of these practice swings, just keep going. just keep going backwards and make a swing. Anyway, I make the fastest, quickest swing. I mean, I've not got a long swing anyway. I make the fastest, quickest swing you've ever seen in your life. I get it back to about my knees, and I start trying to have a go at hitting it. And this thing comes straight off the toe. And there's a tree big oak tree about 100 yards off the first tee at the Belfry, and this thing's going straight at the tree. And all I can think of is that can you imagine your opening tee shot hitting the tree and going bump 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 and coming rolling back to the front of the tee, and Bernard walking up sort of 8 yards and having to hit his second shot. You just, all this nightmare is going through your mind. Anyway, it manages just to clip a few leaves as it goes past it, and finishes in a bunker about 220 yards on the left-hand side of the fairway. Now, one of the nice things is about a month after the Ryder Cup, you get sent all these really nice bits and pieces as well. You get this album of, the Ryder Cup and team pictures and all this stuff, but you also get an album of you at the Ryder Cup, stuff for you, standing, talking to somebody, picking your nose, scratching your backside, looking away in the wind and all this sort of stuff. And you also get 2 videos. You get an official video, Ryder Cup video, and you also get a video of you still scratching your arse and picking your nose. And so this arrives. So I click on my video, and you see, I've got to see this opening tee shot. Did it look and feel as bad as it was? Anyway, I'm waving and smiling down to the first tee. My name's called. I wave and smile. I peg it down. I take a practice swing. I hit the shot. Oh, and there's a few ohs and groans and a clap and a cheer, and we go off. And Bernard's got his arm around my shoulder and all this sort of stuff, and the cheering and going. That's great. And cameramen are all over the place, and I'm smiling and waving away, and I'm thinking, that never happened. I was crapping myself, literally. I might have been smiling because it was gritted teeth. It was like this. And I'm thinking, I'm so nervous. Bernard's holding on to me, and he's like whispering in my ear, and they're all cheering. And all I can think of is that I didn't hit the tree, and this ball is, in the bunker down the left-hand side. I've never been more delighted with a shot in my life. Literally, I'm thinking of
what result?
The tee and I never have to do that. Anyway, and we lose the first 3 holes. We're like 3 down after 3, and ended up getting beaten 2-1. But Bernard played terrible, and we got beat. That's how I always say it.
Is he the meticulous sort of calculated player that kind of he's built to be?
You just reminded me of the calculation thing. We get on to the 4th tee, and we're 3 down after 3. And I pull out the driver. It's a par 5. And I pull out the driver, and Bernard said, "Ronan, what are you doing?" And I was saying, "Well, driver, Bernard." Well, and that was Pete Coleman. Remember Pete Coleman, who caddied for Langer? Pete Coleman's, and Pete, how far is it to the bunkers? And I'm looking, I'm thinking, "Gee, Bernard, I'm nervous already. We're 3 down. Let me get on with it." And it's 228 to get past the bunkers. Why don't you hit a 3-wood down short of the bunkers? And I'm going, "Bernard, we're 3 down. Let me hit the driver. I'll hit the driver." No, Ron. Anyway, isn't he bloody right? I hit a 3-wood down short. He hits an iron down the front. I did an iron, and he holds it for 4. And we went, "Oh, Bernard, go on, hit. You've been right."
It's annoying. It's annoying when your partner's right with this stuff.
It's annoying. It's really annoying. Anyway, but it was good. We didn't play well, and we ended up getting beaten. Then the next day, I knew I wasn't going to play in the afternoon, and so that was fine. And so the next morning, Tony had decided to put Christy Jr. and I out together because he wanted to do the whole Irish thing. Lots of Ireland in the UK, Birmingham, all this, so lots of support and whatever it is. Again, we didn't play well. We didn't putt well. I remember missing, between us, we missed about 3-4 footers and 5 holes to lose holes, and we ended up also getting beaten like 2-1 or something. I then also knew I wasn't going to play in the afternoon as well. And so come Sunday, now, little thing, today, because of the way the play is so slow and stuff, the captain ends up putting the team in before play is finished for all these afternoon matches and stuff. And the same is the case for the singles these days, where he's having to put it in for TV and all this sort of stuff. In those days, you used to have about an hour after the end of play before you had to put in a team and was announced and stuff. So we have a bit of a huddle. Tony's in there, Sevy's jumping around, and everyone's having their moment. And Tony puts his arm around me. And again, great team manager. Tony was during the week. He was very good at telling you what was going to happen, what was he thinking, and how he wanted things to go on. So he's put his arm around my shoulder and sort of say, how are you feeling? I say, Tony, actually it feels though I'm playing okay. Can't help that my partners have let me down, but hey ho. I think that one's gone over your head there. That was
No. I got it. I'm used to it as well.
And he said, look, I'm going to put you out number 4. Can you give me a point? And number 4 in the Ryder Cup even today is a big draw number. You're expecting to lead from the front and stuff, and then my chest is out. And who do I get? Because Chrissy and I have also played Calcavecchia and Green. And also, if now, who do I get drawn out against? Calcavecchia for the 3rd time. I'm fed up watching this guy shuffle and bluter this metalwood down every fairway. It's just driving me nuts and stuff like that. Anyway, we have a great game. 1 up, all square, 1 down, 1 up, all square. But, the whole way around, never a hole in front of it. I win like the 14th to go back to all square. We're half 15, half 16. 17th tee, dogleg par 5, and the 18th inside you. And so when you're on the 17th tee, you're looking straight up to the halfway up the fairway at 18 to the green. And of course, you know you're going to be going that far. You're going to be going up the 18th. As Sevy's playing the opening game against Azinger, I think it was Azinger. Yeah, Azinger has duck hooked it off the 18th into the water, but is getting a drop on a duck island that's in the middle of the water at the Belfry. There's this island with this little duck house on it. He gets his drop that's on this island. Sevy's in the fairway bunker, having driven it through the fairway. He gets the thing, hauls the head cover off with 3 wood, whacks it in the greenside bunker. This is Azinger from the duck island. Sevy decides to have a go at out of the bunker with the wood, tops it in the water. Azinger ups and downs it for a 5. Sevy makes 6, beats him. This is happening as we're standing on the 17th tee looking up. We have 17, Calc and I. We're on the 18th tee, over. Thing is, it's my honour. I stand up, I hit the drive of my dreams. I hit this, for me, a high draw, bounces left, even runs around the thing. There's a green flag goes up to say that it's all safe and whatever it is. There's a big cheer and whatever it is. And, I'm breathing away, you're panting away. Your heart's going 100 miles an hour and stuff like that. And Calc stands up, shuffle. And just as he's about to hit, this guy runs out with a red flag to stop play. Because what's happened in front of us, who is it Faldo and Payne Stewart or something? Payne Stewart, something to do with it. He's in the hazard. We can't see him. He's hit it in the hazard. Just a bit of a hack at going, and he's had 2 or 3 go. I don't know this, but this is what's happened. He's had 2 or 3 goes at it, but he's in the hazard round the corner. We can't see him. So the guys come out to stop play. And in my official video, when you see this happening and see this, well, I think it is Payne hacking about in the hazard. You see this golf ball flying over his head. It's mine. It's my drive. Anyway, so yeah, it's my drive. Anyway, you've got Calc. So I mean, you got to understand that in the Ryder Cup, it's so intense and it's so. And when you're really nervous, something 2 things happen. The world either goes really slowly or really quickly. And for me, it's going really slowly and whatever. Things are happening really slow. It's going all around you, but it's all happening a bit slowly. So with this guy coming out with his red flag and stopping, now it was only for about 15 seconds or so. But I mean, 15 seconds in that time at that stage is like an hour. It's just gone. Anyway, so guy comes up with the green flag, suddenly changes. And Calc's quite quick, so he's like over to the tee and it's shuffle. Doesn't he hit the biggest sky you have ever seen?
Roof set.
Absolutely. 18 handicap straight off the top of the thing. The thing goes straight up. And I'm over to the side because one of the nice little things is that there's lots of observers at the Ryder Cup. And I'm not too sure. I mean, I think it is the same at the moment. It certainly was at Gleneagles, the last sort of Ryder Cup that I was physically at. A lot of the players are invited to come and be, observers and so, Decent. And Brian Barnes, who God rest his soul, I think died last year as well. He was my minder, my observer sort of fellow. Now they're not allowed to interfere, they're not allowed to do anything, but they're allowed to be with you and chat to you and stuff like that thing. So after I've hit my tee shot and all this other flaps happening with Cal, Barnsley's like dragged me off to the edge of the tee and he's like massaging my shoulders and pushed for me, deep breath, boy, deep breath, all this sort of stuff. I'm trying to go like this here. And anyway, Cal hits this roof straight, and it's gone straight up and it's hanging in the air. And Barnsley's like dragging me over to the side and whatever. We're watching this ball coming down, and he can't. Anyway, splash. Doesn't even come close to getting over the hazard. I mean, it's in the middle of the water, this sort of thing. And you're looking at Barnsley go, Jesus Christ, boy, go. And he's like pushing me over the bridge. There's a bridge 100 yards, 50 yards off the end of the 18th above. He's pushing me over the bridge. Get over there, breathe. Barnsley, I'm trying to, And over we go. So I'm down there, and I always remembered I've got 181, I've got 149 and 32. 18th green, the belfry's huge. Pins up left hand side, middle tier, whatever it is. So I've got 181, and you got to let the referees get on with it. So the referees are over with Calc and it's flapping about. Anyway, doesn't he get a drop on the bloody Duck Island? And all I can think of is what I've just seen with Ezinger 30 minutes ago. God, he can hit it on the green. God, he can still make 5. Oh, God, what happens, And suddenly, all contingency plans, you've got all these sort of things going on in your mind. I've got 181, okay, I've got 149. So, okay, so I've got enough loft to get over the water. But there's grandstands and drop zones and stuff. So what can I not shank? Oh, I can't shank a 5-wood. Oh, right. So maybe it might be a 5-wood. I'll just get it over because it'd be really embarrassing if you were to sort of putt it to the end of the hazard and chip it on. And I'm trying to think, how do I not make 6 and lose this match? I can still lose this match. Head cover comes off. Cal gets the head cover off the 3. Went, oh, no. He can knock it on the green. He can actually make 4. Oh, God. Oh, what's going on? Anyway, stands up, hits this shot. Looks like it's in the middle of the green from my angle. Splash. 40 yards again short. Middle of the hazard, nowhere close.
He's never going to finish the hole. That's great.
Barnsley's now got the he's
down to his last sleeve of pro.
His thumbs are now digging into my neck. He's like he's massaging me so much and talking to me. Go. Anyway, Cal comes, head, club back in the bag. Comes round the hazard, and I'm thinking, there's no way you cross the hazard down the thing. You can get a drop down there and chip it on the green because you can still make, 5 at this stage and all this sort of stuff, and I can still lose this hole. And he comes walking. He's walking towards me, and I'm not hitting. And Barnsley's like, holding me back. And he comes walking over to me, and I'm standing a few yards back from my ball that's sitting on the fairway there. And he bends down, he picks my ball up.
What's that?
Calcavecchi, and I'm looking at him going, and I've still got no idea to this day why I'm looking at this guy who's literally in tears, looking at me, handing my ball in my hand, and I'm looking at him going, and that's a 2-shot penalty. And he's looking at me going, what do you mean? And I said it's a 2-shot penalty. You picked my ball up. He said, no, I'm conceding the match. I go,
the penalty didn't even drop.
No. Barnsley's like shoving my hand in his hand because what I don't know. Well, sorry. Barnsley's shoving me towards him, but Tony is shoving my hand in his hand because what I didn't know is it's a bit like going to an auction and buying something at auction. The match isn't over till you shake hands, so you have to actually shake hands before the guy changes his mind. So Tony's like ripping my hand over to him to shake my hands. And he's going, there you go. And I'm going, oh Christ, I've won. What am I doing? And I've never been more delighted with the fact I've never had to hit the second shot. And then Tony has, it's great. It's madness. You got to understand. It's madness now going on. The gallery's going nuts. People are swarming you. There's 50 entourage on every fairway and everyone's clapping you in the back and marks and tears. Literally in bits over there, and I'm feeling sorry for him. So we're walking up the fairway arm in arm sort of for a bit, and then Tony grabs me and says, I want you to go up to the 18th green. I want you to walk over the bridge and go up into the middle of the 18th green and acknowledge the crowd, because I need some noise. I need some noise. For the 9th and the 18th green, the Belfry, the 9th green's beside it, the 10th tee's over there, the first tee's over there. Because remember, I'm match 4. There's 2 hours of tee off times. The first matches are only going up the 3rd fairway or something. The 10th green, the 11th, everything's behind you. So Tony gets me to go up onto the 18th green so that the gallery went nuts. And so that could be heard around the golf course, so that the gallery walking round with the other matches knew that somebody, from Europe had won a game and got a point on the board and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, that's a great team manager and stuff. But God, I think, wow. And the relief when it's over is phenomenal. You can't believe it. And it still gives you goosebumps today. I'm sitting here, you still you're reminding yourself of how it felt like. And I suppose at the time, is the Ryder Cup enjoyable when you're doing it? No. Is it enjoyable when it's over? Yes. Is it enjoyable when you reminisce? Absolutely fantastic times when you played.
Well, it's just such high octane, isn't it? It's like such a high octane environment that's so different as stroke play. And obviously, we started this podcast talking a little bit about the fact that you're playing loads of match play golf and then moving on to stroke play and professional game. But the Ryder Cup just has that intensity, and pairing it with courses like the Belfry, where it's just sort of super kind of geared up towards match play golf. It's and kind of hearing you tell those stories, it's amazing.
I'm not sure I could hit the opening tee shot today, I have to say.
Really?
The Ryder Cup has grown so big. Would I have been able to stand on the first tee in France underneath the after the thunderclap, after the Scandinavian thunderclap, the Viking thunderclap, and
it's
then,
crazy,
and then
isn't it?
tried to hit my tee shot after all of that, with all the stuff going on with the way the grandstand was. But I'm not too sure.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the '94 Open. So obviously you had a career best finish sort of 10 years ago at St Andrews, but am I right in thinking that you played in the final pairing at Turnberry with Nick Price?
Yeah. God, oh bloody hell! God, you're taking me back. Yeah. So the '84 Open was a great one. St Andrews, and in those days there was a 36-hole cut and a 54-hole cut, and I remember doing both. I shot a good round on the Saturday to make it into the last, and ended up playing with Trevino at St Andrews the year that Seve won, hold that great putt on the 18th green, and that was phenomenal and stuff. Again, you've already alluded to the fact it took me a few more years to win in Europe, so now I'm sort of off and running, and I play well, win some tournaments. I mean, worldwide as well. I went down in Australia again as well. And so from 89 to 93, I'm playing some really good golf, making all the teams, playing World Cups, Kieran Cups and stuff. So 94 coming out, I'm not having a good season, not played well, only a few good finishes and whatever it is. We go to the Open at Turnberry, not expecting anything, I'm not playing great. And, usual sort of story, something clicks, somebody tells you something on the practice ground, and it clicks and it works and it feels good, and you had a few good shots, and I shoot like 70 in the first round or something, and the scoring was decent as well. So 70 wasn't that great a score, but at least you weren't out of it. But then I shoot like 66 on the Friday, and, good round of golf, lots of good play. But on Saturday, I shoot 65, I think, and I'm now on the board. I'm now right creeping up the board, and I think I'm in the second last group. I'm with Pricey in the second last group. I'm trying to think. I'm going to say it's maybe somebody like Tom Watson and Fuzzy Zeller are maybe the last group behind. But I'm in the second last group. Lots going on. You can imagine that Ireland has got on a ferry overnight from Dublin or Belfast to come over to watch the golf and all that sort of stuff. So out we go to play, and I'm very nervous. My first sort of, on the board in a lead group, and it's lots going on as well. And I play okay. Anyway, I'm leading with 9 to play. Can you believe it? But I'm playing with Pricey, who's playing like a dog. I mean, literally he's a world player. He's won in the States. He's won World Cup. Well, the Bridgestone, which ended up becoming a World Golf Championship. He's a feature. He must have won a major or two by this stage as well. Had he won a USPGA, maybe late 80s, early 90s at this stage as well. And so I'm playing with Pricey and stuff like that, but he's playing like a dog. I mean, he's hit it terrible. He's nearly hit it on the beach at the 8th with a second shot, 40 yards left of the green with a 5-iron. He's had a terrible tee shot off 9, and it's all really scrappy. I chip in for an eagle at the 6th, I think it was, the par 5 to go on the board or top of the board, and I'm leading after 9. Very swiftly, not leading after the 10th, I have to say, but but then I end up chipping in I end up making a birdie at the 11th and chip in at the 12th for a birdie to be back on top of the leaderboard, I think. And Pricey's Pricey's dogging it away beside me and stuff like that. And anyway, so lovely. For me, I end up finishing 6-4-6, which again, you'll need another day to go through this story because it's an epic. But Pricey's not hit a golf shot worth a damn for 14 holes. And he's hit it over the back of the 14th, hit this big flyer over the back of the 14th, pins on this back little ledge. He hits this bump and run that's never going to make it up the slope. And at last grasp, it literally gets to the top of the slope, sort of pukes over the top and runs down to about 8 feet, and he holds it for a 4. But he's still, Parnevic's leading by about 5 shots at this stage. He's like 3 groups in front of us, nearly in the clubhouse with a 5. He's gone nuts, and he's leading at this stage, but the way in front of us. So when Pricey hits his first decent shot of the day into the middle of the 15th green, so do I. We both make 3. We both hit good drives down 16, pins front left. He half shanks this little pitch shot. It's literally back right, nearly another yard, and it goes over the bridge that you walk down to the 17th tee. And it's nearly in the water, back right, and this pin front left. It's only 5 on, 4 from the left, tucked in the corner. I hit this gap wedge sort of all over, absolutely right down the banner, spin it round the hole. The thing goes bump, 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 and doesn't it suck back? 1 minute it's 3 feet away, next minute it's sucked back, gets to the edge of the green, runs back down into the water. I end up making 6. Pricey holds this thing across the green from 60 feet for a 3.
It's a tram liner, isn't it? Huge putt. I remember my dad had money on him to win, and I remember him dancing around the living room. Vivid childhood memory.
17, we both hit decent drives. Pins front right over the corner of the bunker. There's a bunker eating in. I had a decent shot, just sort of front left. Pricey hits this absolutely low raking, again, I was going to say, sorry, this is niggling on the 18 handicappers. Hits this absolutely rank sort of low hook with the 4 raking thing that runs up and ends up being 90 feet back left. Couldn't be further away, from the hole on the green. Anyway, doesn't he hold that as well for a 3? He then stands up. Parnevic's now bogeying the last. We hear there's a moan and groan on the scoreboard. They're not electronic, for the Open. The guy's putting the numbers up and the things. So numbers come down, numbers go up. Suddenly there's a groan that he's bogeyed the last. Pricey's got a 1-shot lead. Hits a decent 2-iron off the last 8-iron middle green. Wins the Open by a shot. And you're looking at thinking, how'd that just happen?
Wow.
I'm sure we were 5.
Imagine it. It's not how as a spectator of golf, is it?
Yeah, he hasn't hit a decent shot until the 15th. He's then gone 3-3-4. He's gone 3-3-3-4 to win by 1. As I'm just going 6-4-6 to finish 9th or something.
It's
but at least I've got
away from what you expect from a major championship winning round, isn't it?
At least I've got my score, my signature on a scorecard. At least I'm famous for something. I had to mark it scorecard. So
wow, that is awesome.
But actually, it's quite nice because Turnberry's one of the few clubs that has all the memorabilia from various Opens and stuff. So they are quite keen on having scorecards and pictures and stuff like that. So anytime, which is not very often, unfortunately, I go down to Turnberry. I've always got this thing where there's a plaque with the 4 or a frame with the 4 scorecards in, and the whole leaderboard beside it, where I can show people, look, I used to be decent. Look at that. Look, there's my name, and look, there's my name up there.
Wow.
But again, here's the thing. You're talking about prize money. So 1984, I finished 9th in the Open, and I won 11,000 quid.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, it's a pittance, isn't it? Compared, it's an absolute pittance compared to today.
I saw a thing the other day for just playing in a World Golf Championship. Now you get $55,000.
That's right.
Just for playing.
No
Just for an
cut or
appearance.
anything either.
Wow. Well, Ronan, it's been incredible to hear all these stories. We've been going for over 2 hours now, and we're very respectful of your time. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface there. We need to talk more about architecture and your work in broadcasting, but we'll probably have to save that for another podcast.
I did tell you that there isn't enough days in the week.
Well, the good thing about that, Ronan, is you've now got to agree you're going to come back on the podcast.
Well, so same time tomorrow, guys. Yeah.
Same time
Absolutely,
tomorrow.
yeah, we'll be
We're
there.
definitely down. We would love to get you back on because it would be great. I think.
Have you ever done a part? You ever done a part 3, 4, 5, and 6 before?
We have had guests back on. We do have a few. We have a few people that like to come back on. So people like Chris Trott and stuff are some regular guests to the pod. So, but no, it would be fantastic to get you back on and talk about architecture and stuff, and some of the golf courses and stuff you do with Golf World as well. Because you saw our recent film from Brora, didn't you?
Yeah. It was great. I'm Brora. I'm very fond memories of Brora. I have a good time for another story.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Let's go out with a bang on Brora.
I love links golf. Grew up playing links golf. Still love it today. Love being by the seaside. So I'm forever taking myself off to try and play all sorts of obscure links courses around the British Isles, and get a bit of a reputation for sort of collecting these sort of things. So I do an article in a golf magazine asking, 4 questions or 6 questions to the pros, and it's the usual sort of rubbish of, what do you want to do before you die and all this sort of stuff. And everyone wants to hole a putt to win an Open and play in the Ryder Cup and stuff. But I wanted to do things like walk the beach in the gale and see the Northern Lights and all this sort of stuff. And week or so after this golf magazine comes out, I get a letter through the European Tour, and it's from Brora Golf Club saying that we're sitting here at having our committee meeting. It's just been raised that you want to see the Northern Lights, play every links course in the British Isles and walk the beach in the gale. We know you've not been here. It's blowing a gale. We can see the Northern Lights out there and would love to invite you up to play. So the very next day, I ring them up to say, hello, my name's Ronan Rafferty. Yes. If your name's Ronan Rafferty, my name's Hillary Clinton. And I end up, and look, long story. I end up going up to play the very next week, go up with a good mate of mine, and they shut the golf course down for us. They literally, nobody can play. The greenkeepers are out. The place is immaculate. It's been mowed and done and manicured and whatever it is. And they're waiting for us to play. And we arrive, and the whole entourage is there. The captain with all the medallions, the local council's there, and 150 members have turned up to watch us play. And out we go, and nobody will come near us. They're all standing very respectively 50 yards behind, and occasionally you'll be standing looking for a line or, and somebody will come up and go, oh, Mr. Rafferty, it's, if you hit it just inside the bunker, you'll be all right. And I'm wanting to chat to people and talk and stuff like that. And everyone's, treating me like Lord Rafferty, and I was like,
Lord Rafferty.
We play this 18 holes, and when we come in, I've got a bit of a schedule, and we're going this, and said, oh, we've got a dinner for you in the clubhouse. We've got, the committee and the council and everything, committee, and I'm so, oh God, just thought my mate, we're going to have a, glass of wine and a steak in the corner, and no, we got all this. So anyway, it ends up being like a party political dinner. Everyone's up making speeches and saying how wonderful it is that we're coming up, and isn't it great that, Brora and Sutherland can attract people like Ronan Rafferty. And I'm like, oh God, heard it all before, blah, blah, blah. And my mate's nudging me, and he said, look, I've just been told we can't pay for him. We're staying the night. There's nothing we can pay for. There's no green fees. There's no food. There's no barbell. Nothing. And the room's been pumped and everything. And so he said, look, I want to give something back to the club. So my mate says to me, look, what happens if, I've worked it out, it's going to be like 250 quid or something. So what happens if I donate to the golf club? And I said, oh, that's fantastic. Well, if you do that, I'll match you, and we'll donate like 500 quid to the golf club for the juniors to play. So it's my turn to get up and speak. So I get up and I finished off and said, look, as a gesture, I know it's all been complimentary, but we'd like to do this to the golf club, and we'd like to give 500 quid to the golf club for the juniors to play. head of the council sitting right beside me, he jumps up and goes, well, whatever you do, we'll match. And so suddenly, this is like 1996 or something. So they've now got £1,000 apparently. So the dinner's over and everyone's gone, and the captain of the golf club nudges up beside me and he says, Ronan said, we've got a bit of a problem. He said, you know, between you and the council, we've got £1,000. He said the last junior competition that we had, the winner got a golf ball and runner-up got a bag of teas. So now we got all this money and we don't know what we don't know what to do with it. Literally, the entire club competitions don't even play for £1,000 and whatever. Anyway, I end up making I got a mini Claret Jug made and a quake. People who know what a quake's, a little sipping cup, very famous thing in Scotland. And we ended up having, and still today, they play for the Ronan Rafferty Trophy at Brora in all the age groups, under 9s, under 11s, 13s, 15s, up to 18s, for boys and girls. And at the time, not sure if exactly is still today, was the biggest junior kids tournament in Scotland.
Wow.
Really? Is that right? That's great, though. That's fantastic, isn't it? And it's such a magical place, Brora. It really is.
I love it to bits. And I've only ever seen the Northern Lights. I also ended up going to a place further on the road, Wick Golf Club. Used a fantastic vessel up there for a few things, and very fond of Wick as well. And that's where I saw the Northern Lights. I walked the beach in the Gale at Brora, but saw the Northern Lights up at Wick. So I've done a load of the things that I wanted to do, but very, very, very fond of Brora.
Well, we're looking forward to getting you back onto the podcast, Ronan, to talk about it. And I mean, it's just been amazing listening to you talk through your career there for kind of 2 hours. Really, could have gone forever, but those highlights and the stuff that you've only got
1989. We've got another.
We'll have to do it. Yeah, we'll have to do a series. We'll have to do a series on it.
The Adventures of Rafferty.
Watch this.